So our feature story tonight is all about Steve Ballmer actually being on the ropes. Now, you might be asking yourself, how does somebody who's actually worth over $155 billion actually find themselves on the ropes? And the answer to that question can best be found in a Kevin Costner movie, For the Love of the Game, because quite frankly, what Steve Ballmer probably did, he actually did for the love of the game. All right, welcome back to the NBA Rundown. As always, North America, I am Dave DeBaugh coming to you from the Silicon Valley. New to the show, well, we've got 2,500 plus subscribers. Please go ahead and subscribe. We're 1.5 million views in the last couple years. We're shooting for 5,000 subscribers. And of course, smash that like button. All right, now that the groveling is totally out of the way, our feature story is really all about Steve Ballmer actually being on the ropes. And I think the $64,000 question can best be described by Steve himself.
Okay, so what is the $64,000 question? Holy cow, I'm gonna have to tough it up now. Here we go. What's the $64,000 question for the field?
So I don't know about you, but I absolutely love the old Steve Ballmer videos, especially a little later in that video, he just goes nuts talking about developers, which is just totally classic. I guess the question here at this point, considering inflation, Steve, is this $64,000 question you were talking about at the time is more like a $50 million question today. Now, as you all know, at this point, there was a lawsuit filed just the other day against Steve Ballmer and a couple other people. In that lawsuit, they're essentially alleging that Steve Ballmer funneled money through Aspiration so that it would actually just end up in the pockets of one Kawhi Leonard. We're putting portions of that particular suit up for you so you can actually read them and absorb them. I think, Pablo Torre, who first uncovered the story, is certainly not going to be on Steve Ballmer's Christmas card list this year, has done an excellent job. Now, I want to talk about Steve Ballmer a little bit as the Clipper owner, and then we're going to get into what the NBA is potentially going to do. Now, super quick, this particular lawsuit, I doubt will ever see a day in court. I'm sure Steve Ballmer feels like he's totally up against the ropes at this point, and his best way to get off of the ropes is to never allow this particular lawsuit to find its way to discovery. In other words, Steve Ballmer is most likely going to settle this lawsuit out well before it ever shows up in court, which of course would make the National Basketball Association and Adam Silver pretty happy, who probably hasn't gotten a good night's sleep since this season actually started. The gambling lawsuits and all of the things that Adam Silver's had to deal with at the very start of this new season, considering he's got all of these new TV partners, which is, quite frankly, making it difficult for all of us to actually watch our favorite basketball teams. And just one quick gripe on this. You would think if you pay for the NBA package, regardless of whether or not your team is on national television, you'd still be able to actually see the game. That, of course, is not the case. Outside of that, though, so I think Steve Ballmer is going to settle. Adam Silver at some point is going to have to actually figure out how the NBA is going to actually deal with this particular issue. Now, Steve Ballmer absolutely loves basketball. I think it's safe to say that at this point. And Steve Ballmer is a typical billionaire in that whatever he does, he ultimately wants to win. So it's not terribly surprising to me. And it wouldn't be surprising to me to find out that 10 other owners have done something similar in the past, just simply because the people that make billions and billions of dollars tend to live in what can best be described as the gray area. And that gray area is exactly where Steve Ballmer was when he was actually dealing with Kawhi Leonard. Now, I'm not saying Steve Ballmer is a bad guy. If you think about who the previous Los Angeles Clipper owner was, well, maybe he was a bad guy. I don't think Steve Ballmer is necessarily a bad guy. I think he just loves the game and simply wants his team, who he spent billions of dollars on to own in the first place, and then built a palace in Los Angeles, just simply wants to put a championship banner up at that new Intuit Dome, and is basically willing to spend as much money as he can possibly do to get there. Now, of course, that means Ballmer, it appears, is actually living in the gray area as it comes to this particular Kawhi Leonard deal. Look, I think it's pretty simple. It's pretty obvious what happened here. And of course, there has to be a fall guy. Now, if you're wondering if Steve Ballmer is actually going to be the fall guy, I think the answer to that question is probably going to be no. I don't think Adam Silver and the rest of the NBA wants to make an example out of Steve Ballmer necessarily. I think if there's a fall guy to be had here, it's probably going to be Dennis Wong, who of course was Steve Ballmer's roommate in college, and of course owns about 1% of the Clippers today. There will be a fall guy, trust me, and I'm not talking about the movie The Fall Guy or the old TV show The Fall Guy. There will absolutely be somebody that actually falls on the knife, so to speak, for Steve Ballmer. I seriously doubt, though, that it will be Ballmer himself. Look, I'd love to know what your thoughts and opinions are on this particular topic. It is a crazy story. Every time we turn around, there seems to be another piece to the story that wasn't there before. That being said, once again, I think the lawsuit that was filed, and in the lawsuit, you'll see that the company is called Katona, which of course is the new name for Aspiration. That being said, drop in your comments, North America. I want to know where you stand on this. How do you think Adam Silver should handle the Adam Silver portion of this? Should there be massive sanctions against the Los Angeles Clippers? Should Steve Ballmer be forced to sell the team? Or how would you want to see all of this ultimately get handled? I know one thing's for sure. Adam Silver would love to walk into his family room right now and actually just brush all of the Steve Ballmer mess underneath the family room rug, because he doesn't really want to have to deal with this particular issue. Unfortunately for Adam, he most likely will have to. All right, go ahead and drop in your comments when you have a chance. As always, thanks so much for tuning in to the NBA Rundown. As always, North America, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wondering what the hell is going on in the world of sports.